Yeah, well, here on GB News, we really are going to be the farming channel today, really giving some decent coverage to this, as thousands of farmers right across the UK will be descending on cities across the country, many in their tractors, to protest against these proposed changes.
Last month, over 13,000 people rallied against the changes, and today, farmers are warning the proposed changes could kill British farming.
Well, they are scheduled to coincide with both PMQs and a meeting of MPs to discuss exactly what the impact will be of this inheritance tax on farmers.
But despite the protest, the government says their commitment to farmers is, quote, steadfast, and they will not change course on the policy. Well,
earlier we spoke to the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, about this.
The government have declared war on rural communities right across our country. This is an iniquitous tax. This is preventing family farmers from handing on their farm as they'd always planned to their children and their grandchildren. It's going to cause havoc across the countryside.
Well, our reporter Charlie Peters is at Birkin Manor Farm near Slough. Good to see you, Charlie. I don't know if you could hear much of the sort of flavour of the response we've had from our audience this morning, but all of them pretty much unanimously in support of the farmers. And there is this visceral sense, not only of anger, but frankly of just misunderstanding the whole rural dilemma.
Well, Isabel, Ben, what you were just describing there, that angry reaction and that show of support from around the country, that has given the farmers here at Birkin Manor Farm, which has been in an active farm for over 500 years, it's given them a lot of hope that they're doing this demonstration today and that it might cause the government to pause and reconsider. They've been urged by the Conservatives to reflect on this decision. The government say that their inheritance tax plans will only affect around 500 new farms, but the NFU, the National Farming Union, they say it could actually hit 75,000 farms. Now, behind me you can see there are dozens of farmers here. Many of them have travelled across the country. Some starting their journey last night at around 11 o'clock in order to get here just west of London to prepare for that march into Westminster. I say march, it's more like a convoy of tractors. They're a very angry agricultural battalion of tractors. They're all gearing up now to prepare for that departure in the next 10 minutes or so. But we've been here for a few hours speaking to the farmers from across the country to get a sense of why they're doing this, why they're regularly protesting. And earlier today I spoke to some farmers and asked them, what would you say if you were in a room with Keir Starmer this morning, possibly enjoying some breakfast produced by British farmers?
Please reconsider. Please reconsider. You'll go hungry, you're going to starve this country to submission. We've survived foot and mouth, mad cow disease, BSE, but are we going to survive this Labour government?
Do the British public not want to eat produce that's produced here for them to the highest welfare and quality standards in the world? Do you not want that? I think all the Labour just need to really consider what they're doing. Just change it. But you've just rushed into it and you're just going to ruin it for absolutely everybody.
You're listening there to Nigel and Sam, a father-son farming duo. They've also been farming in their family for hundreds of years, and they were telling me also that Sam fears he may be the last generation of farmers as a consequence of this inheritance tax plan. Now, Labour government, they've said, and many of their MPs have said in the Commons, that actually this could benefit farmers, this rise in the inheritance tax affecting those that are worth over £1 million, because they say this will help reduce energy costs. It could also benefit the NHS. It'll give more cash to the government to fill in that billions of pounds, a black hole that they refer to. But the farmers here, they've not accepted that response. And I've also spoken to another future generation of farmers. They've just completed some training, these two girls, and they worry that they're not going to be able to follow in their family's footsteps and continue the family trade.
British farmers produce some of the best produce around, and I think it makes our country very vulnerable personally if we can't produce our own food, and it would be sad to lose the British produce in the country.
I think just think really carefully about the policy that they brought in and how they could change it and make it more affordable and make it more so that farmers can continue. Because as Eleanor said, you all need a farmer 3 times a day and you wouldn't be able to function without one.
Stand back, find out what is a farmer, stand back, have a look, and maybe come back with something to the farmers so we can work with you.
Well, Westminster is usually a place of sharp suits, but this afternoon it'll be Wellington boots and waxed jackets in SW1 as these farmers descend on Parliament to share their message, to share their concerns. And it's not just inheritance tax. They're worried about exports, they're worried about veterinary checks, lots of concerns that they want to raise. And I'll be joining that convoy live on GB News in the next 15 minutes.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate that. And just talking of wax jackets, lots of viewers this morning are appreciating your own farming attire. They love your jacket. We're keen to know what the rest of the look looks like. What boots have you got on? Have you got wellies?
I'm not wearing wellies, actually. I'm wearing, I don't want to give away some free PR for the brand, but you'll see them later. They're smart. They're appropriate, trust me. I know there's, I'm not wearing loafers, if you're asking.
OK, thanks, Charlie. We'll catch up with you shortly.
OK, good stuff. Thanks very much indeed. Let's get some more on this with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who joins us live from Westminster. Good morning again to you, Catherine. Look, just the optics of this, tractors in the capital, causing a headache for the government, but yet they seem unmoved, digging their heels in. And that's even in the face of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who we know to be impartial, saying that there is some tinkering they could do with this policy.
Yes, the government say they are not for turning on this, and tractors in Westminster used to be very unusual, but this will be the third time this year. The police say they're expecting up to 300 tractors today in Westminster. We had them, of course, just a few weeks ago after those inheritance tax changes in the budget. We had them also under the Conservative government back in March because the farmers feel that they have had a very, very rough deal for many, many years. One of the problems is that they are squeezed by the supermarkets. They simply are making almost nothing on a lot of the food that they produce. And sure, they may be rich in terms of assets, but many of them very, very cash poor. But these inheritance tax changes are what farmers say will push many of them over the edge and out of business. And it's interesting, it's timed, of course, to coincide with PMQs. There will be a mock funeral for British farming a little bit later, but also there is a parliamentary select committee meeting this morning looking at the future of farming. Now, they will take evidence from, among others, the NFU president, Tom Bradshaw, and tax experts. And as you say, Isabel, even the Institute for Fiscal Studies, this neutral body, have said that the government should look again at this because the government are saying, look, it's going to affect very few family farmers. You can hand on £3 million if you've got a couple with a house. And that they're investing £5 billion in British farming. But the farmers say they've got their numbers completely wrong. And you do have to wonder what it will take for the government to think again about this. Will it perhaps take some food shortages?
Thank you very much. We're joined in the studio now by political commentator Matthew Stadland to discuss this. Matthew, this is raising a paltry, in the grand scheme of things, £500 million a day, enough to fund the NHS for one day. So at a time when Keir Starmer and Steve Reid, whoever else is saying, farmers use hospitals too, farmers use schools too, we need this money to improve local infrastructure and services. When it's only going to pay for the NHS for one day, what is the point?
How many people do you think can be treated in the NHS in a single day? Have you done those
Probably
maths?
not very many with our waiting.
No. How many do you think?
No idea.
A lot of people are treated in the NHS every single day, and a lot of people are not treated in the NHS every single day because waiting lists are sky high as a consequence, in part, of that previous government, also for other reasons as well. Our public services, we know some of them are absolutely on their knees. You are devoting a day of coverage to, yes, not particularly cash-rich farmers, for whom I have a lot of respect, grown up around farms. They work unbelievably hard, farmers, but they are asset extremely wealthy. You can, as we've been hearing, pass on up to £3 million in some cases, completely inheritance tax free. Tell that to the doctors, or tell that to Jim, who set up a builder's merchant, who does have to pay inheritance tax. Why are we allowing special pleading for farmers?
Because
Of course they can. Of course they can protest. That is absolutely their right. But we are not covering the fact that more than a third of children in our country, a third of children are living in poverty, and we are worried about this tiny minority of wealthy people.
Because farmers, the products they produce, the food they put on your table are the lifeblood of this country. They're not builders merchants who pop up some houses.
Excuse me, pop up some houses. Are you listening to yourself? We live in our houses.
They put the muesli in your bowl that you.
And what do doctors do? What do doctors do? Doctors keep us alive. They stop us from dying.
Up this land, Matthew?
We'll have to wait and see. And by the way, if there are, well, you can speculate. If there are unintended consequences, if the consequence of this if the consequence of this policy is that we can't sustain ourselves with farms, which, by the way, I think is highly unlikely, the government will have to face the consequences of that. But this is nonsense propaganda.
Who else is going to sustain us?
Okay, just to be clear, I mean, you say I think that's not likely to happen. That's not very reassuring. Do you even have the figures? The government can't agree. We've got different figures from DEFRA as we do from the Treasury. There's been no impact assessment on this, and the people who do know, the people whose job this is day in, day out, are telling us loud and clear they are very poor in terms of income, but they are asset rich just in terms of having a tractor, a combine harvester.
But they can keep their they can keep their farms. Now, hang on, they can keep their farms. This is about
when it comes to the winter fuel allowance, that you may have a policy here where you've seen that there are these wealthy landlords, and it's wrong that they are avoiding paying inheritance tax on that, and a lot of people would probably agree. But what you've done, if you've got this completely wrong, you've miscalculated.
Not me. I'm not the government. I'm just giving you my view.
The government can't agree on the impact assessment of this, and it's the same with the winter fuel payment. And as a consequence, there are huge numbers of people, ordinary people, working people, heaven forbid, who are paying the price for this.
Sorry, huge numbers of people paying the price for this. Ben Leo just said on national television he's encouraging, effectively, the farmers to ruin the Christmas dinners of the people watching this programme so that wealthy landowners don't have to pay inheritance tax. I mean, this is astonishing.
What do you think is going to happen when farms have to close down? Who's going to come in and take hold of those properties and the land?
Sorry, why are they going to have to close down? You're missing the point. You are making an assumption because you haven't necessarily thought this through, which is what you're accusing me of. Of course they are, because they don't want to pay inheritance tax. Who does? But if we don't pay inheritance tax, you're going to have to raise income tax. For example, let me finish my argument. You're going to have to raise income tax instead. Why should people people have family farms? Let me make the point. Let me make the point, because you're going to have lots of people speaking up for the farmers today, so let me make my point. Let's take a farmer whose children, as I'm sure is the case in many farms, don't want to go into farming. Right? The assumption here is that all farmers want to hand down their farm to their children. It goes on for generations. That will be the case in some cases, but there will be plenty of farms whose children go into teaching or being nurses or doctors or whatever, or train drivers or train drivers or whatever else it is, right? So then they hand the farm over. The children are already doing something else, and they just inherit this enormous amount of property which they could then sell, and there's no inheritance tax paid on it. That is completely bonkers. There will be people watching this programme this morning who did set up builders merchants, who are doctors, who might live in a £2 million home that they'd love to hand over to their children tax-free. They have to pay tax on it. Why are we making such a fuss about farmers? I say again, I've got nothing against farmers. They work unbelievably hard, but why should their children inherit millions and millions and millions of pounds tax-free when our services are on their knees?
They inherit an unpayable tax bill. Many people means they can't.
They don't have a right. They don't have a right to inherit the family business. There are all sorts of family businesses that are not farms, and people don't have the right, the God-given right or the state-given right in this country, to inherit it tax-free. We're making special pleading for farmers.
Got your message, but just as well politically, I don't think it's. They haven't got the nous, Labour. Why are they doing this for a poultry? Politically, it doesn't seem worth the risk reward.
You mentioned the winter fuel allowance for older people, and I've spoke out against that. Not because there aren't plenty of wealthy people who don't need £200 or £300. Of course not.
Got the threshold.
But because the threshold was wrong, and what they should have done in that is they should have said, if you earn a certain amount of money as a pensioner, or if you have a certain amount of wealth, then you pay it back in your tax. So I think they got that policy wrong.
Why does this government never own that? Why can they never say, we're going to change course? It's as if they think that changing the policy is in some way a weakness, but quite clearly this is just losing public support.
I suspect partly because Keir Starmer would then be called Mr. Flip-Flop endlessly by the right-wing media.
So it's a political... rather than
protect the integrity of the government, I suppose, but on that policy I think they got it wrong. And by the way, you talked about the threshold in farming. There is an argument that the threshold is slightly too low here. There is an argument. No, I haven't conceded. There is an argument because I do have sympathy for people who've toiled on their lands all their lives, but then you have to start saying, well, what about the doctors who can't pass on their homes? What about the builders merchants, as I keep saying? Why special pleading for farmers?
I do find it interesting, though, we've got to go, but I do find it interesting how you're so passionately against this, against farmers.
I'm not against farmers.
You don't know who's going to be taking over that land. Is it going to be multinationals like BlackRock? Is it going to be Angela Rayner bulldozing over farmland to build houses? Who knows?